Today's question: what is the safest way to loan money on a fix and flip? It's a trick question. It's not a first mortgage. It's not a second mortgage. It is using a trust as the ownership entity, and you control the trust. So this is like not first position, but better than first position, I like to say, because you actually own the property. So how do you structure this, and why do you do it this way? One of the reasons you structure it this way is safety. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you can stay in control of the property and the process at all times. And being the trustee of a trust affords you that ability. And let's break down a few different things you're going to need to do in order to structure this loan, not like a loan, but you're now in control of the property, the entity that owns the property, and you have greater flexibility and strength in how you take over the project if your partner flails about and can't finish the project. Because that's really what you need to do, is you need to make certain that you have your money safely tied to this property. And the best way to do it is with a trust. So what you do is you've got to get a deed into the trust. Then the next thing you're going to have is a trust agreement. The other thing you're going to need after that document is a trustee's certification. You're then going to need a promissory note with a pledge of beneficial interest. After that, you need a chattel mortgage, and then an assignment of beneficial interest, and finally a joint venture agreement. So let's break each of those down a little bit so that you can understand why we need each of these. So deeding the property into the trust is really, I'd say, actually the second step. The first step is to create a trust agreement. Now, this is not a living trust, but it's similar to a living trust. This is a trust that is a property holding trust or a title holding trust. And what you do with that is you have one property in that trust. It's a single purpose entity. It's a pass-through entity. And we're going to set up your LLC as the trustee of the trust and the beneficiary of the trust. So let's say, for fun, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got a house that's going to be worth $1 million when we fix it up, and I can buy it for $500,000, and I want you to put that $500,000 in it. You say, sure, but I want to not loan you money in first position. I want to control the trust that owns it. And that's your leverage. You say, I'm willing to do it, but I want to do it on my terms. And if they're smart, they'll say yes. If they're ethical and honorable, and if they have integrity, they're going to say yes, because they're not out to screw you, and you're certainly not out to screw them. You're trying to create a safe, easily dissolvable project once everything is done. And this would be the fastest and easiest way I know of to get this thing done. The first thing is deeding the property into a trust after you've created the trust agreement. The trust agreement tells everybody in the trust or coming into the trust what the rights and responsibilities of the trustee are, what the rights and responsibilities of the beneficiary are, who can do what and when they can do it. And so that's a non-recordable document. And actually, I like to have language in my trust agreement that says, I can't. As trustee, I'm not allowed to record it. If I chose to record it, I would be immediately fired as the trustee. So I would have language in there. If your beneficiary decides that they want to argue and fight with you, that this document is non-recordable, I write it right at the bottom of the document on every page. This document is not to be recorded in any courthouse. It's very clear, so that if somebody were to take this document to the courthouse, they get to see that it has no ability to be recorded. Secondly, what I would do is make sure you're the beneficiary and the trustee. Maybe it's your LLC. I would advise that. I would educate people to that. let's make sure you are the trustee and make sure that you're the beneficiary. And I would suggest that people make their entity, such as an LLC, as one of those, or probably even both of those. So now you have bought the house in the trust, you funded it, and alongside of this trust agreement, you're going to get a promissory note from the person that's going to do the actual work. They've got their responsibilities, and they're going to come in and they're going to pull out the toilets and the carpet, they're going to paint it, they're going to put a new roof on it, they're going to re-landscape it. All of the various things that they have to do, they are now responsible for doing that. But in order for them to stay in the project with you, they have to sign a promissory note. And in exchange, you're going to pledge the beneficial interest. They're going to sign a promissory note. For them to stay in the deal, let me start this over. For them to stay in the project, in the trust with you, they're going to sign a promissory note with a pledge of beneficial interest. So the promissory note is, I promise to pay this amount, I promise to pay by this point, and I promise to pay off by this point. So there's a couple of different parameters of the promissory note, which is fairly standard. The additional part of the language in there is, if they default, they pledge the beneficial interest back to you. That's a critical component to this. They're pledging the beneficial interest back to you, which then takes us to our next document, the chattel mortgage. Chattel means personal property, not real property, like you would get on a regular bank loan, for instance. In a regular bank loan, you're going to get a mortgage and a note. And the mortgage is the security instrument for the property in that scenario. On this scenario, the chattel mortgage is just on the assignment of beneficial interest, which is our next document. So the chattel mortgage is the security instrument for the beneficial interest, but not the property. Crazy, big, huge. It's only on a piece of paper, not a piece of real estate. I hope that makes it clear. So you have an assignment of beneficial interest, which is the next document. And that document just says, I, as the original beneficiary, am assigning my interest over to this new person. And that could be their entity, which would be smart for everybody. The other document you really need to make sure of is you get a joint venture agreement. Now, the joint venture agreement has to spell out what your roles. Let me start that over. Now, the joint venture agreement has to spell out exactly what your role as the joint venture partner are. And maybe that is, you create the trust, you manage the trust, you make sure that the trust documents, the sale documents, and the listing agreement are all taken care of properly. And let's just say that those are some of your responsibilities. And underneath that, you have the responsibilities of the person you've assigned the beneficial interest with. And that is your partner, your joint venture partner. So your joint venture partner has some very specific things they need to do. They need to complete the project in 90 days. They need to complete the project with a certain quality. They need to complete the project at a certain budget. And those are the criteria that they have to do. And they also acknowledge in that joint venture partnership, that joint venture agreement, that they have taken over the beneficial interest in the trust on condition that they meet these criteria. So what we've now done is we've created this entity structure that allows you as a trustee to stay in control of the property, the project, and most especially your money, so that they can't go and not pay you, not finish the project, walk away from the project, and still own it. And so then you would go to foreclose on them, and then they stall the foreclosure through a very long and protracted and probably very expensive bankruptcy process. And all you have to do really is say, look, you haven't made your payment, or you didn't complete it on time, or you didn't complete it like we'd agreed, and I'm taking the beneficial interest back. because you've really clearly outlined everything. And you've really taken time to consider what are all of the different aspects that might become problematic, not just in a week, but in 6 months or maybe even a year if it's a long-term project. And you don't necessarily want to take the project over because you're an ethical person, but you may have to take it over because this is your money and this is what you've invested in with these criteria. So I would urge everybody to really understand the structure here and how it's going to impact you, the major benefit to you and your long-term investment strategy, how you don't have to go through the foreclosure process and the potentially years-long, tens of thousands of dollars of fighting a bankruptcy hearing if they throw up their hands and they try to fight you. It's a losing proposition, even if you get the property back. Drama is something we want to stay away from. It is in my opinion that this is a safer way to invest in these fix and flip homes passively. You might even do it actively. You may even get a portion of the upside even this way, which is what I've done a lot of too. There are some times where there's enough meat on the bone where I say, look, I'm willing to put in the majority of the capital. I need to make sure they have a little bit of money, some skin of the game. I need to make sure that they have some skin in the game as well. But I think that it's really a safer way to invest and not have to loan money so that somebody else controls the property. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just send a question below. I'll get to it.